All right, folks, thank you so much for tuning in. We're going to go ahead and start it as other guests filter in. But my name is Chris Neidl. I am your host today of This Is CDR and one of the co-founders of the Open Air Collective, as well as the executive director of the Four Corners Carbon Coalition. This is CDR. For those of you who are new to attending one of our weekly programs, this is every Tuesday, just about. Occasionally we take some time off. This is our Open Air's flagship webinar about carbon dioxide removal. And each week we host a different change maker or innovator or subject expert related to CDR to talk about their work or their companies or their technology. And then that is followed by a conversation that involves you. I will, as moderators, ask our guests today a couple of questions to get us kicked off. But then following that, we are very eager to get comments and questions from you. So you can just add those to the comments section to the left of your panel, right rather, and we'll go ahead and incorporate those as we go. But before we get started with today's guests, we have Nash, Leef, and Jim Doten, who are going to talk about municipal biochar. This is a subject that I am intensely interested in, as well as many people in the open air community. And so you're going to hear directly from two amazing on-the-ground practitioners who are making biochar work in their respective cities of Minneapolis and Lincoln, Nebraska. But before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and give just a little bit of background for folks who are new about Open Air and This Is CDR. Those of you who are new to Open Air, I'm sure I've already seen a lot of people put comments, so I know there's a lot of our active members probably watching. But Open Air is an all-volunteer global network that is dedicated to advancing durable forms of carbon dioxide removal, which includes biochar. And so our members are engaged in multiple different what we call domains or action areas. And they include programs like this, which fall under education. So at Open Air, we host a lot of webinars. This is CDR being the most consistent one. We're up to, I think, close to 110 episodes so far that can all be viewed on our YouTube. But we have other programs as well, which Tank, my co-host, you'll meet in a second, will drop the links to, such as CDR AI, which is a kind of like a ChatGPT LLM that's for carbon dioxide removal only, that's backed up only by peer-reviewed and government data sources. So it's a great place to plunge into carbon dioxide removal if you're a newbie or want to do a deep dive on any particular area of it. We also do a lot of advocacy. Open Air has been one of the principal drivers of particularly state and municipal level carbon dioxide removal support policies in the United States, although we also are active in certain parts outside of North America. We've introduced over a dozen bills. We've passed 6 of them into law. This session, next week, I will finally be able to debut what our cohort of policies that we're pushing for at the state level are in 2025 and 2026. We got an amazing batch of them that I'm incredibly excited about. So I'll look forward to telling you more about that and hopefully getting some folks here to participate in our efforts to make those law. We also support enterprises, whether that's coming up with new business, CDR business ideas, or actively trying to support new businesses or models through volunteerism. Last week, we had a great episode with the Naka Valley Biochar Project in Uganda. Happy update from that. We sold all of our carbon credits directly for this month, which is supplied Marius and his all refugee team in Uganda will support their operations for the next 2 months. And then we also have an R&D wing where we have folks that get together on citizen science projects and open source maker technology projects to build and improve open source innovations. And we'll definitely be featuring some of those on future episodes of This Is CDR. As I said, very exciting update from last week. Within an hour of our webinar ending, we sold all 12 of the eco assets, our carbon credits, which again goes directly, or 70% of that goes directly to the Uganda team, and that will support their operations for at least another couple months. We have more credits coming online next week as well, and we'll keep the community updated on that. But thank you, everybody, for your generosity and support. You can also view that episode in Open Air's YouTube channel, which Tank will drop the link to. It's the last episode in the playlist for This Is CDR. So if you're interested in joining Open Air, we're an open community. We generally hang out and get together on a Discord, which is a lot like Slack. And you can go ahead and join that. Tank will drop the link for that, and we'll welcome you once you arrive. Now, one thing I want to do before we get into our program, which we're excited for, is a little bit of fuzziness on the screen I see, but I just wanted to take a moment to remember Peter Eisenberg, who I learned that we lost last week, sadly. For those of you who are familiar with the direct air capture space, it's hard not to be familiar with Peter. He was a titan and a true pioneer and one of the godfathers of direct air capture. A brilliant physicist, who longtime faculty member at Columbia University. His pioneering work in the field helped lay the foundation for what we know as direct air capture and directly informed the technology that was the basis of Global Thermostat, a current direct air capture company. I had the privilege of meeting Peter a few times over the years and was always just blown away by his scintillating genius and passion for CDR generally and direct air capture particularly. So he lived an amazing life, and his legacy is really before us, I think, rather than behind us. So thinking about Peter and thinking about Nick, his son, who really carries the DAC torch for him, and the rest of his families and friends who are definitely thinking about Peter right now. So thank you, everyone. So moving on today, we will get right into it. This is, again, something I'm extremely excited about, both the subject and our guest today. We're going to be talking about the role of municipalities in driving biochar production, adoption, and innovation. And the United States right now is home to a small but dedicated cohort of cities all over the country that are either standing up or have already stood up biochar production operations in their cities in partnership with their cities. So today, we have two figures in two cities that are really on the vanguard of that effort. We have Jim Doten from the city of Minneapolis, Minnesota, and we have Nash Leef from Lincoln, Nebraska. And they're going to join us right now, give short presentations on their projects, where they currently stand, and what their future is. And with that, I will bring up my buddy and co-host, Tank Chen, who will go ahead and introduce our guest, and then we'll move right into presentations. Go ahead, Tank, take it away.
Thank you, Chris. Hi, everyone. Tank here from Taiwan. Today, we will welcome James, or Jim Doten. Jim is the Carbon Sequestration Program Manager for the City of Minneapolis, where he has played a leading role in the city's biochar initiative. He has been instrumental in launching Minneapolis Municipal Biochar production facility, focused on its application for soil health, stormwater management, and urban tree planting. We also have Nash Leef. Nash is the interim president of Nebraska Biochar Initiative and the owner of Flatwater Carbon, a private company partnering with the City of Lincoln to implement its local biochar program. With a deep commitment to sustainable land management, Nash has worked extensively to advance biochar deployment in Lincoln and across the region, helping develop municipal strategy to enhance soil and water quality while reducing waste. So welcome, Jim and Nash. Jim, whenever you're ready.
Hey, Jim. Sorry, it looks like just intervening here as stage manager here. We'll just take a minute as Jim is just going to upload his presentation real quick again, and we'll have it on the screen in a second. So, Jim, do let me know if you need any help with that, but should be all good to go.
Nope, I appreciate it. It's just ended up backing out for some reason, and now it's going back in. So we'll be ready in just a second. But I appreciate as it uploads, I appreciate the invitation here to talk to you today. So name is Jim Doten from the City of Minneapolis. And like Nash, before we get going, he is the interim president of his regional association, and I'm the president of the Minnesota Biochar Initiative. And so we are also standing up regional associations to build leadership in the upper Midwest for biochar. And I noticed that my S got moved on me here, but I want to talk to you today about the Minnesota Biochar Program. Now, you all know, like I said, this is CDR. Take this one off. You know about carbon sequestration, biological, geological, technical. But what we're trying to do here is move from those biological timelines of taking carbon that's captured by biological material, in this case trees, and turning it more into a geological timeline, more stable or durable, as you all are aware. So that's the intent of ours, is to take it from that biological storage into the geological timeframe sequestration. In biological, like I said, nothing's better than a tree in collecting and capturing carbon. And we have quite a few trees in the city here, and we use those to grow our carbon capture. But the one thing about trees is they're great at capturing. However, they tend to go into the reversals. And this is the same street in Toledo over a 2-year period. And this is from emerald ash borer, but there's various storms, diseases, etc., that make it the tenuous hold for the biological storage. And in Minnesota, we've had, like a lot of parts in the United States, infestation of emerald ash borer. Minnesota is actually one of the heaviest populations of ash trees anywhere in the United States. And this is devastating to us. In the next 5 to 10 years, we're looking at a wall of wood coming through here. And our system in the metropolitan area is geared to handle 350,000 tons of wood a year. We're currently experiencing 550,000 tons coming into the system. What that means is about 200,000 tons is going up into the atmosphere. We're already starting to open air burning. So what do we do to help stabilize the situation? In our case, we come up with biochar. And many of you are familiar with biochar, so I won't go too deep in it. But what we're doing, it's pyrolysis. We're using pyrolysis, so we're heating biomass in the absence of oxygen, and in our case, up to 600 degrees Celsius, but anywhere above 350, and turning it into a stable crystalline form of carbon. It's very stable, very high carbon content, and can sequester about 2.5 times its weight in carbon dioxide equivalents. And that's after accounting for all the handling and processing, et cetera, after the life cycle assessment shows that we're over 2. And here, what we're doing in Minneapolis, we're trying to take a carbon negative approach. The one thing that we realize is that we want to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, and you can't reduce your way to zero. There's no way. There are some emissions you can't abate. You need some component of carbon dioxide removal in that long-term storage. Biochar is one of the best scalable ways to do that. We received a grant from Bloomberg Philanthropies along with Nash in Lincoln, and Cincinnati received one as well. These are one of 7 grants worldwide to help build municipal biochar systems. And what we're doing was originally based on what was going on in Stockholm, Sweden, which is the original one funded by Bloomberg. I had the chance in 2019 to go out and see that operation. And we're taking wood waste and turning it into biochar. The project goals that we came up with are to have local pyrolysis. I've been working on biochar since 2013 with the City of Minneapolis, but I've had to bring my biochar in from the outside, which it removes a lot of the environmental benefits or climate benefits having to transport it. What was limiting us was not having biochar available in the upper Midwest. So getting local production was the first thing to overcome. The second goal of our project is climate equity. And what we're trying to do is that, as we know, climate change affects everybody, but doesn't affect every population equally. And there are parts of our population that are more prone or more exposed to the effects of climate change. And we identify them in our areas, our environmental justice zones, but what we call as green zones, where we do extra efforts in order to overcome the disparities in those environments and really looking at narrowing the health disparities. So that's a lot of our focus. But the other one is that in Minneapolis included, but we're looking at to be a regional resource or regional asset throughout the metropolitan area to help other cities achieve their climate action goals as well and build a climate resilient green infrastructure underlying the systems and address a lot of issues such as food insecurity, et cetera. Carbon sequestration is the name of our program, and that's the approach we've been taking, is looking how we can not just store carbon, but sequester carbon for long periods of time. And by, in this case, turning it into biochar. which has been shown to be durable and stable. There are a lot of different things you can make biochar, herbaceous material, leafy material, wood, and biosolids. They each have their place. But we find the wood at the right temperature provides the balance of both carbon sequestration and environmental benefits. So that's the other side of the coin at Minneapolis we're looking at are the environmental and social equity benefits of the biochar on top of the carbon sequestration. And the third is we are generating carbon removal credits. The intent here is we can either retire those against our own carbon budget to help achieve carbon neutrality within our carbon budget, or we can possibly sell those in order to help finance the project. That's a decision that has to be made at a higher level. Chances are we will be retiring them, but there's no guarantee of that. But I wanted to make sure to give credit to Bloomberg Philanthropies for their generous grant on behalf of Minneapolis, Lincoln, and Cincinnati. Okay, this is the history. In 2012, I first encountered biochar in Afghanistan, and I was with the Army as part of an agribusiness development team in southern Afghanistan as a hydrologist. But I noticed the crops were doing very poorly, and it wasn't just the water, but the soil needed rehabilitation. It was very depleted. It was very susceptible to erosion, etc. So I figured out how can I find ways to improve the carbon yield of the carbon stocks in the soil and make it a functioning soil again. That's where I came across biochar. Coming back to the city in 2013, the city heard what I did and thought, hey, let's try biochar, and one of the first programs in the country to start looking at biochar. And one of the big events we have in there, this is MOU SMSC in 2014. What it is, we have a memorandum of understanding with the Shakopee, Metawakan, and Sioux community, which is an Indian tribe located just outside of Minneapolis. But they also happen to run the largest organics recycling facility or composting facility in the state. So I was obtaining biochar and mixing it with their compost and delivering that to at-risk groups in our environmental justice communities, underserved communities, to help rebuild their economic base or their reduce food insecurity and reduce food inequity. And so what we've really shown is that we are able to grow more food, make it drought resilient, and grow food that they couldn't get in the community. So culturally appropriate foods. We've continued that relationship. But in 2019, we realized that in order to keep this sustainable, we can't keep buying biochar. How do we make it? In 2019, had the chance to go out to Stockholm. Bloomberg brought us out and took a look at this. As a city, we passed a biochar resolution promoting the use of biochar within the city. And we also did a large project with Minnesota Department of Transportation on a corridor from the airport to downtown, which is one of our first bigger type projects. In 2022, we put it into our comprehensive plan, our 2040 comprehensive plan. So this is to build biochar as a means of building climate resilient communities within there. So we've agreed to do that. 2021, we received a grant from the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance, and that was to build a biochar playbook on how municipalities can use their feedstocks to develop biochar programs for carbon neutral or carbon negative programs as a city. And this was with Boulder, Stockholm, Helsinki, and Minneapolis. And that resulted in the biochar playbook that we worked with Canby and Carbon on. In 2022, we passed our climate equity plan, which is our climate action plan revised to focus on carbon. We officially started our carbon sequestration program after getting the grant from Bloomberg. And so now we work in this full-time in this program. In 2022, we also held the first Minnesota Biochar Summit, bringing together the network, including the universities, state agencies, nonprofits, governments, etc., to start this process, working together as a collaborative. And from that emerged the Minnesota Biochar Initiative as a regional association, of which now I'm the president. The next one down is 2025. We're anticipating starting our biochar project. Moving through here real quick, in respect for your time, this is the facility where we're building at. We're going to be breaking ground in April to construct. I just, in fact, today worked on the approvals for the contracting on it. And we are building an above ground facility that is fully enclosed. And screening for this is very difficult to find a location in a built community where you can pass zoning, residential issues, etc. This is located adjacent to the University of Minnesota along some railroad tracks in an area, former industrial area that's being redeveloped. And the facility itself is fairly extensive. We have what is called a rotary kiln that we've already purchased, and it's pyrolyzer. And one thing that we're doing on ours, we cannot grind wood on site because we're in the middle of the city, but I'm getting wood that's pre-shredded in the field, bringing it down. We're chipping it further to 3/4 inch or 20 millimeter size. It then is being conveyed into a hopper for drying, dried to 15%, run through the process, and then processed into biochar at 600 degrees Celsius. It generates more heat than it uses, and so there is an opportunity to use for waste heat. We're working on what to use that for, where the electrical generation, snow melt, steam, hot water, etc. We can take, in 3 hours, process enough wood to last the process for 24 hours. It's totally automated. You can run it from your phone as long as things don't jam up. And we can process about 3,500 tons of wood a year. So it's smaller side of industrial, but we're the first, instead of trying to show the process can be done. These are some of the uses that you can use biochar for in municipal applications. And we are doing all of these issues right now. The one future one that I'm currently working on a grant with the research project with the University of Minnesota is looking at it in building materials, and particularly bricks, mortars, plasters, etc. And there is a lot of work out there going on concrete use as well. We're a cold weather climate, doesn't work as well in asphalt as I would like, but we're looking at a lot of different uses. And actually, stormwater is one of the biggest uses we're working on right now. We're working closely with the Minnesota Department of Transportation into use of construction and transportation projects, and that's another area we see a great opportunity. And again, these are some of the things we're currently doing. We've been deploying biochar in various projects: agriculture, stormwater, trees, transportation, etc. And in the future, we're looking more into the surface water, concrete, and doing remediation, particularly with lead and PFAS. And here's some of our partners. This is a short list of our partners that we're working on. And we're working on through Minneapolis. In addition to this, we have additional partners we're working on through the Minnesota Biochar Initiative. And as one last note, the 2025 United States Biochar Initiative will be holding their national conference in Minneapolis, September 15th through 18th. I hope to see you there. I'm currently a board member of USBI, and would love to see you in town to discuss it further. We're expecting about 1,200 visitors coming to the city. With that, here's my contact information. I appreciate the time, but I need to move on for Nash.
That was great. So many questions, Jim, that come out of that I can't wait to get to, including some interesting ones from our audience, but extremely exciting how far along you guys are. Really excited to bring up Nash, Jim's counterpart and frequent collaborator. Hey, Nash, how you doing?
Great. Glad to be here.
Great. So I'm going to go ahead and put your presentation up, and you can take it right from there.
Sounds good. I've got a bit of a shorter presentation because I know that Jim was going to cover a lot of our sort of foundational shared understanding of biochar in municipalities. But just as a little bit of background, my name is Nash Leef. I'm the owner of Flatwater Carbon, private partner to the City of Lincoln, co-founder of the Nebraska Biochar Initiative, which is standing on the shoulders of giants in a lot of ways. And my background getting involved with biochar is as a 6th-generation farmer on the Great Plains. So I first got involved working with biochar in 2016 in farming applications here around Lincoln. So my work here in Lincoln really comprises 2 things. It's education and direct outreach. So Jim was talking about a lot of projects that they have going on in Minneapolis. We share a lot of those. So I'm going to do some ways that we're different, but there will be some overlap. So a lot of our work here is helping folks understand what a watershed moment it is for cities around the country to be developing municipal biochar programs. We compare it a lot to composting programs. Back in the 60s, it wasn't really considered commonplace or even expected that a municipality would have a green waste composting program. Now, of course, we take that for granted as being something that any green-minded city would do, and even cities that are not so green-minded. It's just a practical way to manage urban waste that doesn't go to the landfill, because landfills are expensive. So we think biochar can stand on that same footing and hopefully be just like composting facilities in another 50 years, where, of course, your city would have a municipal biochar production facility. So just to give you a snapshot, you may be thinking Cincinnati, Minneapolis, and Lincoln, Nebraska. One of these things is not like the others. And that is true. However, Nebraska has some interesting legislation all around the state. We're the only public power state. We've got free tuition to anyone who makes under $60,000 a year. So I oftentimes like to say Nebraska is secretly socialist, as long as you don't say the S word. And one of those things that Nebraska pushed through is that our municipalities can basically expand and take over other municipalities that are in the same county as them. So Lincoln geographically is actually huge. It's unlike a lot of other cities proper that are rimmed in by other smaller cities around them, suburbs or other small urban core cities. And therefore, our feedstock watershed is actually quite sizable and comparable to cities that are population-wise much larger than us as far as their metro areas goes. So just to kind of put it in perspective, when we're talking about urban canopy, urban tree cover, urban wood waste, I oftentimes like to convert it over into acres of forest, just because that's something that I think a lot of people in biomass are used to thinking about. So when we're talking about what Lincoln is dealing with here, you can see by these graphs, it's actually a pretty sizable amount of feedstock that comes through the city in a given year. Most of that's private, as you can see by the graph on the left, but the city itself manages quite a lot of feedstock. Furthermore, we have other facilities nearby that are currently dealing with their feedstock, their valuable biomass in open burns. And we see this across a lot of the Western US, especially, where you have so much biomass and it's such a fire hazard that there is a actual routine about just getting rid of this material at all costs. And so we see that here in Nebraska as well. Oftentimes people say, you know, Nebraska, our old state motto used to be gateway to the West, implying you're on your way somewhere else. But I think it's kind of fun to think of Nebraska as where the East meets the West. So we have a lot of that eastern sort of humid forest in our cities, but we also have Western fire problems and Western feedstock. So it's kind of an interesting use case for both sides of the country. Just going real quick through some of our implementation, because Jim already talked about so much of it, and a lot of this is going to feel a little bit, you know, quick. Like I'd love to spend time talking about any one of these things in more detail. So please send questions to the chat. But we were able to do a lot of community implementation over the last 3 to 4 years with help from Oregon Biochar Solutions and the Nebraska Forest Service, who were basically able to get biochar to the public, to city-owned land, to nonprofits, to our municipal composting facility, which is something we're really proud of here in Lincoln that other cities, I think, will probably utilize in the future. But just going from top left over, so on the top left, the city of Lincoln, like I said, geographically huge. The city actually owns 2,000 acres of farmland. That's just buffers around buildings. We get our water from wells out here. So we also own farmland on top of our wellheads. And one of the things that started our biochar journey as a city was converting that land over to regenerative agriculture, not spraying some of the compounds that we then try and filter out downstream when we're trying to get that drinking water to our citizens. So that's something that biochar really plays into. And that we initially did an application of biochar and city-owned farmland there and did some research. And there's some really cool greater experiments that have been going on later down the line. We also distributed biochar to Omaha Sunflower Co-op. So Lincoln and Omaha, not quite the same municipal area, but we're close enough that we're commuting cities. So it's just about 45 miles with a string of cities in between. So a lot of collaboration over in Omaha as well with Omaha Sunflower Co-op, which is a BIPOC neighborhood garden really focused on remediating urban soils that weren't necessarily productive. It's a historically Black neighborhood, not necessarily a lot of food independence there, but really historically fertile farmland. Omaha used to produce most of its own food in those river bottoms on the Missouri River. We've also got City Sprouts over in Omaha, similar thing there, remediating urban soils to increase food sovereignty in urban areas. Center here, we've got the City of Lincoln's composting operation, which has now been amended with biochar. Some of our first municipal compost amended with biochar called Earth Fuel Plus or Earth Fuel Blend is headed out as of this month. So citizens in the spring will be able to purchase super sacks of municipal compost that's amended with biochar and get that in their gardens. We've also got Community Crops here in Lincoln. Community Crops runs all of our community gardens and our farmer training program here in Lincoln. And that is almost entirely the farmer training program held by refugees. So that Lincoln is a refugee resettlement center. We have a huge Vietnamese population. And then increasingly, we've got Middle Eastern folks who have come and been resettled in Lincoln and live happy lives here, but they need to learn how to grow in our climate. So we have right here a field that was standing water for years and couldn't be farmed effectively. After applying biochar, it was actually farmable. So that was, I think, the most stark improvement of any of our projects here. We've also got this one, which is just quite flashy. I always like to show this one. So this is probably our most public-facing project utilizing biochar in the city. So this is Sunken Gardens, which is in and of itself kind of a test case of utilizing urban space effectively, which Lincoln is kind of well known for. We don't have a lot of sprawl like a lot of other American cities do. It's been a very centrally planned city from the beginning. And so some of our use cases here, like this is in the heart of our city, the Sunken Gardens, our premier botanical garden. This is biochar being applied where citizens can see it every day. And this was the site of a former landfill, actually. So all of this is on top of a landfill in the heart of our city. And this is it in September of the same year. And we've already gotten a commitment from our gardeners at the City of Lincoln that they'd love to implement biochar in their witch's brew every year, just because it really helps. We tend to be a boom or a bust climate, like a lot of Western states, where a lot of years it's drought, and then when the drought ends, it's flooding. And so biochar helps to mitigate both of those extremes, holding water in the dry times and preventing water from running off, creating a lot of problems during the flooding periods. All right, this is a really cool one. I'm really proud of this. This is the Nebraska Urban Soil Health Initiative. This was a program that got biochar, cover crops, it got no-till practices, training in no-till practices out to a ton of different farmers across the state and backyard gardeners. So I think there's over 5,000 participants. They got applications from like other countries. People were so excited to jump in, but it was just Nebraskans who were able to get funding to apply biochar or compost and biochar, all of these different regenerative agriculture methods in their backyards on small plots or in a more research-oriented setting. But really utilizing citizen science to understand how biochar works here in Nebraska. That's about a 2-year-old program. So we're still getting data back from that. I think that's a 5-year study all in all, so quite lengthy. But it's really incredible seeing updates from that. And I think that's a really great example of how collaboration with research institutions, with citizens is a key difference in how municipal biochar projects have been impacting their regions versus some private entities. This one's the really interesting thing here about city-owned farmland. So we've partnered with the University of Nebraska here in Lincoln to utilize city-owned farmland, which you see here, for one of the largest biochar field trials that I know of anywhere in the world, but certainly the largest in the Midwest regarding the application of biochar and biosolids. So that's just trying to understand how those two municipal products interact with each other at scale on conventional farmland, which you can see is quite a big deal in the Midwest, especially as we're dealing with things like PFAS. in biosolids, how can we continue to create this environment where cities can apply biosolids to farmland without causing problems to their surrounding communities? But that's really great. I would advise you to look that up. That's Dr. Michael Kaiser, who's running that study. It's incredible work. Again, jury's still out on that. I think that is expected to be a 10-year trial. So we're talking about really long-term trials, which I think is important in the biochar space, because so many trials are focused on 1 year, it's a snapshot, and we don't get a lot of data after that. Well, we'll see if it'll let me move on here. We'll just try and move on manually. All right, and then just like Jim in Minneapolis, we did host a conference. So we did the Great Plains Biochar Conference here last year, and we were really astounded by how many folks came through. We had folks from Minneapolis, from Colorado, from Iowa. We even had folks come in from Canada. So, I mean, a really great selection of folks who came through to just talk about biochar in the region. And I think that that's really telling, because the Great Plains really has been experiencing a boom in biochar projects. I think Minneapolis sometimes likes to throw themselves in the Great Plains bucket, so we'll call them honorary Great Plains residents. And they were well represented here, and I think that there's some really great foundational work that's being done in this region specifically. And really, like Jim said, it's all about partnerships. So we have tons of different partnerships all across the region, and we're trying to apply biochar in a number of different ways. One of the most innovative ways that the city's trying to approach biochar application, I think, if we're just going to pick from one of the group, is biochar as a amendment to new buildings. And that has a benefit. And we're currently working with our Home Builders Association and our code agencies to understand how we can make it work for both parties. But the simple version of it is that we apply biochar to new builds underneath the lawn, the turf that they were going to put in, which is great for the homeowner. They don't have to pay anything extra. And it's easier to fertilize, it's easier to water. And it's great for the home builder, because we can reduce the amount of water that runs off of that new build, and therefore reduce the water retention pond that's required at that new build. So they can maybe put in 1-2 more units, creating more density, reducing the amount of stormwater ponds that we have to put into the site, and paying essentially for the biochar that's then being put in the soil. Since so many of those soils are removed, they don't have the topsoil anymore. It's just the subsoil clay in this region. So that's something I'm really excited about. And this is just a quick map of all the cities that I know of that either have had or do have municipal biochar projects across the world. Stockholm gets an honorable mention here. Their project is no longer up and running, as I'm understanding it now, but it's quite a few in Europe. And then we're really seeing kind of a boom here in the States as well. These are all the either current or future municipal biochar projects that are expected, with the star out there in Delaware and Maryland. For the names slipping my mind right now, but there's a really great watershed project going on out there, which I'm not certain will result in a facility in and of itself, but it's certainly of note as a public-private partnership out there. And this is just a little video showing that the unit here in Lincoln has been delivered. So our sort of status update is that we were ready to go last year, and then we found out that we were operating on a floodplain, and that the city had been operating on a floodplain for probably about 50 years. And we just happened to be the straw that broke the camel's back, the one that made the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers say, you can't site this here. You have to raise the entire site by 2 feet above the 500-year flood line. So it's quite a blow to the project. We were all ready to go. The unit was being placed, and we got the order to put everything away and raise the whole site. So we're very hopeful that this will be off the ground soon, but the future there is a little uncertain. All right, thanks for your time.
All right, wow, fantastic. I don't know where to sort of start. So many questions. One thing I want to do is I just want to share a comment from one of our audience members that I think sort of sums up probably what a lot of us are thinking, including myself, is just how impressive what you're both doing is, and how not only do we need more of these, but what you're describing, it really, there's no compelling reason why we can't have more of these. I think once we get really the work that you guys are doing bearing fruit and showing results, I could see this really spreading pretty dramatically. So thanks for the comment, AJ. We do have some great questions, some real technical ones from Jeffrey, some questions on research from Toby, which I'll bring up in a second. But whoa, where to start? One thing I want to say, you both gave some backgrounds, and Jim, it turns out you and I were in Afghanistan at the same time. I was there in 2012 as well, working on water and sanitation stuff.
Where were you at, in Kandahar or East?
No, I was based in India, but I would fly up to Kabul. I went to Parwan, a few areas around there. Yeah,
I've been in that territory.
Yeah.
I just want to say, Nash, that the enterprise out in the east is Chesapeake Bay Watershed. And Charles Hedberg is the one heading that up, and they are using wood-based biochar. Baltimore is starting to look at producing biochar. Philadelphia is looking at a project. New York is looking at a project. Raleigh, number of cities out there. I probably talk to 1 to 2 cities a month.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, Jim. There are a lot of cities that are in the exploratory phase. We get a lot of that too, where folks reach out, just curious as to the how we tackle it, because the cities have tackled it in different ways, and you see different strategies. So yeah, it's really great to see so much interest, and we do get a lot of those inquiries.
Yeah, and I'd love to start with, a lot of the people that are tuned in here are biochar heads, myself among them. We do a lot of content on biochar here. But the place part of it is really, really significant. And I also have to say, when a lot of people think of sort of forward-leaning, tip of the spear places, you associate it with certain municipalities or states, typically on the coast. I'm from a place in upstate New York that's used to getting overlooked as well for the things that it does. But I just think, like Nash and both of what you were explaining, it's remarkable not only what you're doing, but how it's grounded in local conditions and serves local needs and uses local resources. So I wonder if we can kind of start off, and maybe we'll go in reverse order here, Nash. What are the kind of background conditions in a place like Lincoln, in addition to what you said, that kind of made this possible? You had the grant from Bloomberg, you have, certain other things, but there's a limited number of places that are really at the leading edge of this, and Lincoln is one of them. And just tell us a little bit about Lincoln as a place and how it created a platform for your work.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I love this city. I'm not a Lincolnite. I grew up in Colorado, where my family's farm is, but I was a transplant out here. And I got to say, there's a few things that we can chalk it up to. The initial goal behind the program was we dealt with some pretty severe flooding that had impacted some low-income neighborhoods here in Lincoln. Nebraska literally means the flat waters. And that's because our rivers are very prone to flooding. It's really great for the soil, not so great when you build cities on it. And Lincoln, like Washington, D.C., was built in a marsh. So we are a perfectly flat planned capital, just like our nation's capital, and we tend to flood quite easily. And one of the things that caused us to pursue biochar was there was a researcher at the university who proposed that if we got a 1% increase in soil organic carbon in the watershed surrounding Lincoln, which is a Herculean task, but not completely unaccomplishable, that flooding could have been avoided. And that was one of our impetuses for seeking out these carbon sequestration techniques to figure out how they can work for our citizens. And then I'll also just say Lincoln has some incredible city leadership. We have a very strong mayor here in the city, and it's been something that has been on their radar for a long time, just how to improve the day-to-day lives of citizens. So Lincoln's, I think, one of their top goals every year, they issue a State of the City pamphlet, and it's to make Lincoln, Nebraska the most livable city in the country. And you can really feel that when you live here. It's not supposed to be flashy. It's, flyover country. We're used to folks looking us over, but we have really great circumstances here that allow projects like this to get off the ground. And then furthermore, we just have that east versus west. We have the feedstock in our urban tree canopy, but we're also pretty at risk for fires. We have a lot of red flag days out here, and a lot of feedstock that's out in the bush as well, like eastern red cedar. Most of the Great Plains struggles with that encroaching. And so there's a long-term deployment effort here as well. There's expected to be 3 new biochar facilities if federal funding ever gets unlocked through our state's climate action plan here in the next 5 years.
Awesome. I'm dying to come up and visit. I'm down in Austin, but I definitely pay you a visit. But it sounds like a great place. So congrats on everything you've done. Now, Jim, we've had a couple of folks from Minneapolis come in. I always talk about Minnesota and Minneapolis as the real sort of sleeper places for carbon dioxide removal innovation, of which your project is absolutely one of them, but you're not alone. But yeah, tell us a little bit about the conditions in Minneapolis that kind of made this, your efforts gave a little wind at your back and made this possible.
No, it's a lot like what Nash is talking about. Every situation is different. We look at it nationally, but when it comes down to not all those national issues fit everywhere. For us, one of the things we have is that we are being affected by climate change. We're having the same amount of water, but the distribution is all wacky. And so we have a lot of shorter, more intense rainfalls and periods of drought. How do you address the issues with food insecurity in urban food systems, flooding issues once they start, keeping the trees alive, etc.? And those are some of the issues we were dealing with. I brought up biochar, like I said, it's something I encountered in the field. It was about 100 miles east of Kandahar along the Pakistani border, and looking at that, and all of a sudden you see biochar and all the amazing things it can do. It's like, oh my gosh, this can be plugged in, part of this complete solution. One of the other things is, when I was looking at it, though, is trying to get going. All the feedstock in the city was accounted for. I mean, from both public and private side, the system was balanced. We have a large plant in St. Paul that's taking a lot of waste wood to make into steam and electricity, and that competes for a lot of the waste wood. The emerald ash borer presented an opportunity, never waste a crisis, where they had a complete imbalance. And what do you do with this wood? And that allowed us to propose an alternative means that when the system is stable, we wouldn't have been able to do. And now there's a crisis. Let's take an opportunity for it, establish new and better patterns where we're actually accounting for the wood and removing it, putting the CDR component, and building a climate resilient city. Now our public works and parks and others are really involved with it, looking at it from a stormwater aspect of transportation, keeping the trees alive, site restoration, etc. The drought resilience, the ability to infiltrate ground or stormwater, etc., is really important. So those, but it was for us, the thing that opened the valve for the opportunity was the emerald ash borer crisis.
Yeah, it's great. I'll be visiting you as well too, probably pretty soon, Jim. We got some interesting stuff that we're open to brew in Minnesota. We do have some great questions, and just for time, I want to get to those. Jeff asked a series of very technical nuts and bolts questions that I think we could probably answer quickly. That'll be helpful. But before I do that, I want to actually just pull on something that Tank was messaging me during, which is quite, I think notable, is that those of us in the carbon dioxide removal world, we often start from, we need to do CDR, whatever that is. It needs to happen this much by this point. And the further down you go to where implementation happened, the less that resonates, the more sort of abstract it becomes. And I realized what you guys have been able to do is really kind of put the utility of it and linking it as a solution to a felt event and risk that happened. And I'm curious if you could tell me, how does that change people's perspective on carbon removal as a solution when you're able to define it for them in very, very local terms? Because I think that's what's sorely needed. Did I capture that right, Tank? I think that's kind of what you were sort of noting.
Yeah, the use case of it. Yeah.
And we do have, I know Nash has as well, and that drove a lot of the local thing, but able to talk about the benefits of the biochar and what it can do, the environmental benefits. And oh, by the way, it has this amazing climate benefit as well. And that's why I originally had to start that conversation out. It evolved into, let's talk about climate. And then, oh, by the way, it has environmental benefits. And now it's going back the other way, but you can't talk about one without the other. And the environmental benefits is what's really driving the creation of it and use of it. And you have these climate benefits that come along, but you really have to create the market. You can't just create biochar and have it sit somewhere. There's got to be a place to put it, a place to use it. And that's what Nash and I are working on, not only at our cities, but also through his regional association, our regional association, and linking it back up to at the national level, and creating those use and creating that demand so it pulls through the system and becomes part of the solution and just second nature instead of a one-off solution.
Yeah, it's great. Go ahead, Nash.
Yeah, we always talked about it because I come from an ag background, so I'm oftentimes talking to folks through that lens. We're using it as a tool to solve a problem. We're not here just trying to sell biochar for the sake of selling biochar to the community. We are bringing in a resource and we are utilizing it to create change and make a positive impact on someone's life or someone's bottom dollar. And then as a side effect, we're sequestering that carbon permanently. And that really resonates with a lot of folks. I think that there's also just the on the ground climate anxiety that I've really noticed that we tend to make a dent in. Folks really want to see that personal impact, and when they hear, "Oh, my city, my tax dollars are going," well, this isn't tax dollar funded; it's all been grant funded. But my city is putting in this effort to put forward these solutions to our own local problems, and then furthermore, I get to sequester a little bit of CO2 in my backyard, CO2 equivalent. That's been huge. I think that folks are really excited about just being able to have a part of that process.
There's so many other questions I could ask you right now. So let's start with this. I love that you guys are doing this project, but you're leaders in a broader movement where you're connecting your counterparts in other cities to sort of share what you're having. Is there a way that people might be interested in that? We probably have some folks that are even watching right now that might be in those kinds of positions to act. What's a good way for them to get involved with you, if they want to learn more and they want to maybe advance something similar in their own cities?
They can always reach out to either Nash or I, or Nash and I preferably. And one of the things that we do also through the Minnesota Biochar Initiative is similar to this. We have a monthly webinar series called Char Talk, where we bring experts in to talk about. In fact, last month we had Dr. Michael Kaiser from the University of Lincoln, Nebraska, coming out talking about the project. And anybody wants to speak on that about biochar, welcome to it. But come on in, find these out. We've got networks here that we're discussing. We have frequent meetings where we get together and discuss biochar options. We also have extensive networks that we're connected into. We've then said I'm on the board for the U.S. Biochar Initiative, which is great. Please come up here for the conference, etc. But reach out to us. We'd be glad to hear about you. If you're involved in municipal biochar, really glad to want to hear from you. Because one of the things we want to do also is create a network of municipal biochar cities, and so we can learn from each other's mistakes, because it's amazing how similar our paths have been. If he has a bump, I have a bump. I have a breakthrough. He has a breakthrough. It's been eerie in the parallel nature.
All about the networks, and count us as your biggest cheerleaders. So anything we do to help. Go ahead, Nash.
I guess I'll also say Flatwater Carbon is part of a little consortium called Carbon Dynamics, and we've been more or less actively seeking out projects to develop in the public-private biochar space. So that was really catalyzed when we found out that Nebraska was receiving the climate action grant to implement our state's climate action plan. And that was going to produce 3 biochar facilities across the state, preferably public-private partnerships within the next 5 years. And that made us look to the broader region and say, we have some skills that we've developed here. We could help other folks develop these projects as well. And it's really just trying to advance public-private biochar projects across the country and make sure that when folks are navigating this, they're not navigating it alone. Jim's, of course, a great resource in that respect as well. He's got a different kind of lens on it from the internal perspective. But we've also found that a lot of cities don't necessarily have the funds to hire out an incredible position like Jim's as the carbon sequestration coordinator. Did I get that right?
Isn't that
manager? Same thing.
Program manager. Yeah. So that's incredible when cities can do that. But not every city has those kinds of dollars lying around. So sometimes it helps to bring in folks who can just hold your hand and help you get through the hurdles.
Yeah, Jim, I don't know if anybody else has your job title among municipal work. Carbon Sequestration Program Manager is pretty extraordinary. Well, let's real quick. We'll go through these quickly. Jeff did ask some great questions. I think probably other people are asking. Tank, I'm just going to pull them up, and maybe we could just they're pretty technical questions, so we can give quick answers to all of them. That sound good, Tank?
Yeah.
All right, so we'll start with the first one here.
Yeah, so the first one here, I guess goes out to both of you. So, your project, what is your yield that you're expecting, and then what do you do with the gas and liquid byproducts, and do you scrub to capture the smoke that's coming out, and what is your cost generally you're looking at for your projects locally?
Nash, I'm going to take a stab at it because I think we're going to be very similar. And if yours is different or you don't agree with my numbers, please correct me. But the yields are for what we're doing. Typically, if you're bringing in green wood, you've cut the tree down, it just fell over in a storm, whatever. You're going to break it on up. We're going to get about 1/3 of that is going to be converted into biochar. 1/3 is water. 2/3 convertible carbon. The other part is the carbon that we use to fuel the process. When we heat it, takes the volatiles, brings more on, it does it. So it's usually about 35% yield coming on in, and we're using very similar processes. So a rotary kiln at 600 degrees, thereabouts. And what are we doing with the gas and the liquid byproducts? There are processes, fast pyrolysis, gasification, and slow pyrolysis. Fast pyrolysis, typically get your bio oils. Gasification, you get your gas. In slow pyrolysis, what we're doing is heating that up, breaking the pyrolysis gas down. It's being brought around and used to run the process. You can take that excess heat and do other things with it, generate electricity, heat things, etc. But at the end of the day, we're not collecting that syngas. It'd be fairly dirty to have to be cleaned up quite a bit because you do have some tars and residues in there. But once it gets flared off, our particulates, there's almost no smoke, so to speak. The particulates are very low sulfur. We've gone through the air permitting process. We do not require an air permit. Very low emissions. Stockholm had the same experience. Etc. So we haven't had the need for scrubbers because it's a very efficient burn. The gas that comes off is burned very efficiently and very low emissions. And the cost that we're offering for the carbon credits, we're guessing at or doing the swag method on that, but those are going anywhere from $100 to $200. And for planning purposes, we're using $100. Hope for better, but $100, I believe, right now is the best conservative price. Nash, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that you're about spot on. Our yield is figured lower. We figure it's 1 to 4 from biochar to feedstock. So there's a bit of a difference there. But again, that's going to vary day by day, season by season. Both Minneapolis and Lincoln tend to have pretty pronounced seasons. So that does cause some variability. Otherwise, all correct. We are in the same bucket as Minneapolis here in Lincoln, where we're not certain if we want to market those carbon credits to sort of push the project forward to make it stand on its own 2 feet, or if that's something the city wants to decommission themselves to meet their own climate goals. So
great. Well, we are at time. There's a zillion other questions we could ask about permitting and many other things, but I really want to thank you, and I want to just give you an advanced invite here. We got to have you back next year when you guys are in the ground and have a sort of a body of work behind you, because I think what you guys are doing is exceptionally important, and we need to really be making sure people know about it. So congrats on your progress so far and what lies ahead.
Oh,
thanks.
Thank you.
All right. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly, I know we're a couple minutes past time here, but I'll just go with just quickly show you what we got coming up. In the next week. Next week, we're actually going to be off because I am going to be on vacation. But the following week, on the 25th, we're going to have Octavia Carbon, our good friends from Octavia Carbon who have deep roots in the open air community. This is the first direct air capture company that was started in Africa, in Kenya. And they're going to be coming not only to give us a refresher on what their technology is and background of their company, but really exciting. They're right now, and I'm getting pictures on a weekly basis, they're building the first direct air capture plant in the Great Rift Valley in Kenya called Project Hummingbird right now. So you'll be able to get some pictures and some background on how that's progressing. And then after that, we're going to have, after Octavia the following week, we got our buddies from Carbon Gap, which is the premier CDR advocacy organization in Europe. They have a new awesome policy tracker, revised version of that they're going to launch, but we're going to use that as an occasion to kind of talk about the CDR policy landscape that's happening at the EU level as well as member state level. So definitely join us, any wonks out there who want updates on that subject. So with that, we're going to go ahead and call it a day. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And hopefully, if Nash and Jim can just stick on once I end the stream and we can talk for a second. But thanks, everybody, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.